Hello, everybody. It is May 30th, and this is the OLM Welcome to the Energy Triage meeting. On today's agenda, we're going to talk about the operator controller milestone being cut and also discuss upgrade documentation with this link given by Frederick. Cool. So we'll kick off like we usually do by looking at the ongoing milestone. We'll see that it's version 0.2.0 and it's fast due by 4 days. We've got a bunch of issues closed right here. And this kind of segues into the first item on our topic, which was whether or not we wanted to cut this release and just move these two issues to the 0.3.0 milestone. Joe.
So 205, don't we have a PR open for that?
Yes, we do.
And how far off are we from thinking that's ready to be merged?
Yeah, good question. So we were talking about this one with Ankita earlier today, and the basic state of the PR is that it's functional. Currently, one of the tests are implemented as an E2E test, as opposed to a unit test, and there's some discussion on whether or not we should go ahead and just merge as is and create an issue, or if we should take the time to convert those E2E tests to unit tests. And I'm happy to hash that out right now, right here, or we could do so on the PR. But functionally, this work is completed and validated with an E2E test.
Okay.
Ankita also gave a ref estimate of 1 to 2 days if we wanted to switch over the unit tests. So that might influence the decision. Do we want to hash this out here, or should we drive it through the PR?
We can take that offline, I think.
Okay.
I guess the question is, for here, the question is like, well, are we going to make that block the release or not?
Right. And my gut is that we shouldn't, just so that we're constantly cutting releases and constantly getting new content out.
We could break that out into a separate issue and just have that not block the release that way.
We can probably move this to milestone 5, right? And we should be good.
Yeah, I think so. Like Anik suggested, I think the easiest way, if we wanted to say, hey, we're ready to cut this release, it would be to move 205, 206, and 229 to milestone 5, or the next version of this milestone, and just make that decision as part of that milestone, and then we can cut the VO or V0.2.0 release. Does anybody have any strong objections to that?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, well, we'll do that. I don't want to take the time to do that right now. I can do this offline, and then I can just give an update in the Slack channel, but let's get it on there. Regarding what we'll pull into the next milestone, though, we did have two. I'll just pull this up in the so we had created 2 issues of streams that we wanted to propose. They were identified as stretch goals. Yeah, for the 0.2.0 release, and they are 232 and 231. So 231, I think, is in a pretty good state to be talked about and pulled in, but it's just as an OLMV1 user, I would like to respect upgrade edges defined by operator authors. It has a bunch of it has a demo script, specifically calls out some kind of stuff that's out of scope, and it leaves some open questions for people to consider when they are implementing this. I think this is in a good state to kind of be one of the candidates for the next milestone. We can discuss this more offline, but I just wanted to bring it up in this meeting. There's another issue that Todd had submitted that focuses more on giving OLM V1 users the ability to define when installs occur. So right now, our policy is as soon as it becomes available, we upgrade to the next thing. Or sorry, look.
Yes, the next thing, but also there's been some discussion on this further down between myself and Joe.
My thinking here is that probably like this is I think a larger subject than the other one.
Mhm.
So I think the discussion that Todd and I were having was getting towards breaking it down into smaller chunks potentially. So we just hadn't gotten that far yet.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I think 231's then in like an actionable state where it's pretty well defined and pretty scoped, and perhaps we could also take on breaking this one down and possibly pulling more content in over the next week. So 232 and 231 are the ones we want to, consider, and I just wanted to bring them up in this meeting so that they'd be in front of everybody so we can start, get them on everybody's radar so we can start collaborating on them. Okay.
I did start breaking down 232 into smaller chunks, if you can see by the tickets at the end. So
One thing I wanted to ask for anybody that is on the call, other than these two issues, is there anything else that would be interesting for us to look at, like in the next release? Essentially, is there anything else that we've seen that's problematic in what we have now, or that would be a nice new feature to add? So I think like either tech debt fixes or improvements or new features, they're kind of all on the table. So if anybody else has any suggestions, I'm definitely open to that as well.
One item that has come up a couple of times now is like adding a progressing condition, which could be kind of useful. I don't know if we.
there is an issue for that somewhere.
Right. And that could be a good candidate as well, because I think knowing that whether or not we're.
It may not be called progressing. It might be, yeah, there's
There's two things. So.
Yeah. But I think there was, yeah, I referenced it in the remove ready, the type ready condition.
Yeah, this could be, this is a candidate show, I think. So. I'll just very quickly.
To me, that one seems more quality of life. So it's like, yeah, unless someone's explicitly asking for that, that doesn't seem super high priority, and it seems like the other ones are more interesting, unless there's a specific use case that we need progressing for. Because I think you could probably derive progressing from resolved, true, install. Like there might be a way to understand that something is progressing without actually explicitly having it. Although I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, it's more of a QoL improvement, right?
At least at this point, like unless there's some other component or human who is asking for it, it seems like it's an idea that might be nice to do, but otherwise not sure how important it is.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
So, Alex, I did add two other issues. I added the labels milestone 5 and then both of them are in the operator controller repository. So you can see them from the project also. Which overview.
Project. Okay, one second. Milestone 5.
Oh, I don't know why.
Yeah, you actually have to pull these up. So if hashtag operator, do you know what the numbers are so we can pull them? It might be easier if I just look for this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yep, that's one, and then there's one right at the bottom of that 1.5.
Oh, this one actually is kind of useful. Like supporting different bundle formats. So like supporting a plain V0 registry V1.
Right. Essentially, right now, when you install an operator or when you create an operator resource, it create the bundle deployment that it creates. It is hard coded to be one particular provisioner. This particular story is saying that we should allow different types of bundles to be installed via the operator API.
Yeah, this is way better than my suggestion. What does everybody else think?
Yeah, I agree with this.
All
It's
right,
actually-
let's throw. Okay, so I'm just gonna add this in, so I'm kind of using this as my own personal tracker right now. Okay, we got one more that we want to pull up. Issue, so
Yeah, I think you already pulled it up in one of the tabs, right? But that's fine if you want to keep opening tabs. It's your laptop.
yeah.
Yeah, so the test that was introduced as part of the integration for catalog D and operator controller that just uses the operator hub IO catalog, which is a huge catalog that takes a lot of time. The timeout right now is 5 minutes or something like that or it just keeps waiting for 5 minutes for the operator control the catalog to be ready. And that is why I think we've already had this discussion where the tests are seeing some flakes. And we've discussed switching that to instead create a new catalog and use that instead. So we should probably do that this milestone and eventually switch out that operator hub IO catalog in the test to use the test catalog.
Right, and quick question here, so. What is this pull that Joe says we need? Extensible unpacking interface. Okay, so this is you can do stuff other than just images, okay.
So we
So-
need another issue in operator controller that says bump catalog D to 0.2.0, which we just released last Friday.
Okay, so maybe we can just. Okay, I'll just add a to do. Create bump. Catalog D to, what was that version?
0.2.0.
Okay.
And you can assign that one to me. I've already started looking at it. Or I can create that issue, like you can assign that action item to me.
And then. This issue is just saying, hey, we should. So. My understanding is that the PR that Joe linked is, it's only making it so the catalog D can accept different types of formats, so. What work do we actually need to do? Is this actually building just a smaller FBC? Is it saying that this FBC can easily be translated? Like, do we have to start building an image using that? Is that just a make file change we'd have to do and then kind load it? Or what exactly?
Yeah, so the reason we need 0.2.0 is because it pulls Bryce's sourcing mechanism in, which uses image pull policy if not present, and that's important because we want to be able to put an FBC in the repo and then build an image and then kind load that image into the kind cluster, such that by the time we go and create that unpack pod, the image already exists, and if not present policy means we don't have to try to pull it.
Yep, that makes sense to me. Okay. Cool, so we'll pull this one in as well. So this issue right here, this was the one we said we probably don't want to do, right? Yeah, so maybe we could add this as a good first issue, a low priority. Just in case somebody wants to grab it. And we'll just remove that from here. Okay, so what this V0.3.0 candidate is starting to look like. Just gonna close all these tabs because like honestly that can be a little annoying. But we've got our first one, which is going to focus on honoring upgrade edges. This one's more of a review thing. So we want to start talking about this and start breaking it down into doable chunks. Just gonna move this one down in priority. This next one was to support different bundle formats. And then finally, this is bumping catalog D so that we can then do 215, which is the E2E framework improvements. And then 232, the goal is just to start breaking this down and get it to a state where we can start assigning it, right? Add that to comment. And Todd's already somewhat started on that effort. Okay,
So Alex,
good.
for the sake of completion, these are the ones suggested based on the capacity for the teams that are working on this right now. But then there are some issues that have the good first issue / help wanted labels. It's probably prudent to bring this up in the call if anybody in the community wants to get on that, on some of those issues. We can start, suggesting them as candidates for these releases too. So for example, in catalog D, we have a issue that says we need to update the README. Fairly important thing to do, but it's just capacity wise, it keeps getting pushed out. So I guess we're looking for anybody who's looking to get on board and start contributing or anything of that sort that can help with these issues.
Yeah, does anybody want to get involved?
If somebody can collaborate with me, I don't have the information, but I can help kind of shape it.
Okay, do you want to look at that README one and we can add a collaborator? Okay, Bryce offered to collaborate, so we can pull. Do we want to? Sorry, I just looked. I don't want to pick the work and assign it. Which issue are you interested in looking on? The contributing MD, README MD, or possibly this?
I think 81 will solve 61. So I think 81 is the one that we're primarily looking to.
I'm just gonna add here. And I'll let it know price. I'll do that on the issue too. So I believe that is that Michael that stick out?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and assign it to myself.
Okay, cool. Clear assignees. So I'll do that and then also assign Bryce to it. Just so that
Absolutely.
yeah, I'll just do that now since I've got it up. So Bryce will help you. And cool. So on that note, I think that gives us enough to get the milestone kind of bootstrapped, and then I'll send a message out in Slack once we get this like kind of it. I don't want to keep you guys along while I'm just pulling issues into different views. So I'll take care of that, send a Slack update, and then we'll see if we are, if we're ready to commit to that asynchronously. All right. Okay. So on that note, I see that we have one more item on our agenda. So who is our friend here today? Frederick, are you available to speak to this issue?
Yeah, it's a simple follow-up of the discussion we had last week, and there was James' proposal to use a replace for CRD during the upgrade. So we we don't have any procedure to upgrade OLM. And so this issue is to look at that. I was proposing, so to follow James' recommendation of last week, to use a replace for CRD, and we could pack that in a script so that it gets the same UX as the install.sh script, and we can check that things are working, and also keep using apply for non-CRD resources. So that's basically the proposal I made, and I wanted to get some feedback on that.
Joe, I see your hand went up.
Yeah, I wonder what, like, do we have an idea what we want to actually support from an upgrade perspective? Because we've never said anything about upgrading. And so I wonder if we should say, like, run this upgrade at your own risk, or if we should put more guardrails on it where, like, we've actually tested the upgrade and then can commit to it a little bit stronger. I guess I worry that, like, we'll put this out there and then people will say, oh, I had OLM, v0.0.1 from 2015 installed, and I wanted to upgrade to v0.24 and things horribly broke. Please help. You know what I mean? Like, how do we make sure that people don't, I don't want to say misuse, because it wouldn't be their fault, but how do we know, how do we make sure that people are successful with this?
Yeah, so I'm just describing an approach for implementing the upgrade. Now there is obviously the documentation part, so we should, as part of the release that we provide in the release notes, we should clearly state what we support in terms of upgrade, and yes, we should validate that in a sense that and at least we could start with incremental upgrade, meaning that you can upgrade from 0.23 to 0.24 to the next 0.25 and so on. So that would be already a good improvement compared to nothing. And if there is appetite for it, then we can look at having more testing for a skip version upgrade. But I think having already incremental upgrade would be a lot better than nothing.
I see that Andy has his hand raised.
Yeah, just to Joe's question, I would recommend that we have upgrade tests in CI that cover what we want to consider valid, supported, tested upgrade paths, and everything else is probably, your mileage may vary.
Yeah, so I agree that's where we should strive to get. I think I'm also in agreement with Frederick's suggestion to, we can start working on this update script, and with Joe's suggestion of making it clear, like, hey, this isn't tested yet, but if you are on a current version and need to upgrade, like, you can do this, but mileage may vary. And then we could create some follow-up tickets for actually making sure that these upgrades succeed. And once we have that portfolio of tests that, like, meet our expectations in terms of what a safe upgrade is, then we could consider removing that note from the upgrade script. But I feel like Frederick's point that users are currently in the worst possible world right now, where they install OLM at one version and then they have no idea what to do when a new release comes out. I feel like addressing that issue even in an incomplete manner is valuable, And then when we make the decision, like, does it make sense to invest in CI and creating a testing suite that guarantees upgrades are safe? That's when we can start making that experience better. Anik, I see you have a hand.
Yeah, I think you just touched upon whatever I wanted to ask in the last statement, which is creating these test matrix that test different upgrade paths is a significant investment. And I've heard these upgrades very sparingly for OLM V1 V0. I'm not exactly sure from where I stand how that investment can be justified. So before we create that ticket, it might be worth sort of like creating an RFC that says that here are the users that are not using OLM as part of OpenShift, but outside, and therefore they would like that upgrade to happen. And therefore this justifies us investing this time in creating that test matrix.
Yep.
I agree with what Anik just said. I was also gonna pose the question of like, well, we've gone, what, 3 years, 4 years, or without an upgrade script. So I wonder, like, could we wait a little bit longer to have that CI set up before we put an update script out there? Or do we think that it's like so urgent that we'll go ahead and put an upgrade script out there with a bunch of caveats on it and then work to improve it? Like, to me, like, it doesn't seem like the urgency is that high. Like, a lot of this I feel like is sort of us inventing some of this, where like the person originally, the question was like, hey, kubectl apply didn't work and the thing was too big. And then we sort of rewound that to, oh, we need to have a full-blown update support. And I'm not sure that was actually what was being asked for. So I guess, yeah, I'll reiterate what Anik is saying, like, make sure that we're not doing a whole bunch of stuff that no one actually cares about.
Right, so my view on that is first upgrade, and in case of OLM, it's mainly about API changes, and there haven't been that many, and there are even less planned for OLM V0. So I think I feel that we are looking for issues where there aren't any. And in terms of experience, so looking at OpenShift, they are not doing anything differently, and they do upgrade OLM. So, okay, we can say nobody is interested in OLM V0 running it in production, then we can forget about it. But if we are saying it is a thing to use OLM V0 for anything further than sandbox, and it feels legitimate to work on this thing. And really, I don't feel that it is as much work as I heard, in the sense that writing this script is just a couple of hours, and I will need to look at the CI thing. But you know, if we are just looking at incremental upgrade between releases, I don't think that we have a huge test matrix there.
Yeah, maybe what we should do immediately is respond with the information that you learned, Frederick, about like, okay, yeah, for this particular failure case, you can use replace. And then we can close out that original issue if we haven't already. And then separately, to sort of gauge what people actually care about, if we open a new issue or a discussion and ask the community to upvote it if they care about it. And then if they have specific desires, they can tell us what exactly they want, to sort of figure out what makes sense to do. In my mind, I agree with you that like putting together the update script is easy. I think the hard part is the support tail of, okay, now that we put it out there, now there's an expectation that we'll maintain it and that it works. And so I worry that adding CI tests to for upgrade, like now that's another opportunity for something to fail. If no one actually cares that we do it, then do we mark it non-blocking? If we do that, like it just seems like it has a bunch of dominoes that fall if we put it in CI, and then you have to ask yourself, you know, is it worth it?
Yeah, we can follow up on Slack on that.
Okay, so it seems like next steps are community, so just add clips here, so the community is concerned about possible board locations of releasing on the upgrade script. That's very is this a real request? Two is add a comment to original issue explaining the workaround using replaces and create a discussion asking users to vote on if they feel that zero are necessary. Right?
Yeah, and I wanted to play devil's advocate with myself real quick, which is, do we have a small community because we don't take these sorts of normal enterprise software life cycling concerns seriously? And is this like a chicken and egg thing where if we did have the upgrade stuff and we did support it, then more people would be interested in OLM, more people would use it, more people would give us feedback, and more people would contribute, et cetera, et cetera. So I think to an extent, like some of this stuff we just have to invest in so that we can grow the community. I'm not sure this is the right place to do it necessarily, but I just wanted to throw that out there as we should probably be doing this sort of thing in general, especially with OLM V1.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring this up because I was I was thinking about this same thing, like would it make sense to have an official upgrade script for on V1? And then I realized that we don't have this issue because you can just use apply, which is what the latest install script kind of does. But we don't have an ACI test, which I think would be the crux of the thing, right? Like guarantee, hey, this new version is upgradable too. And then there's like like the install script doesn't do any consideration when it's like, oh, hey, we removed a YAML. And I don't think that's happened yet, but that's like something we probably have to support too. So I think it makes sense to, you know, consider addressing this in like the new stuff because, you know, I think the SDK got a portion of the operator framework got a lot of support because it could be used. It made great stuff, and there was a very clear like, hey, this is the thing you can use. But with OLM V0, we just never really got it to a point where people would use the upstream version on production clusters, and I think that kind of hinders its adoption because if it's not like a production state, I don't know how many long-lived Kubernetes clusters are really going to install and use it. Perhaps a follow-up is to create a ticket in the operator controller that just kicks off or maybe even a discussion and just start saying, hey, what's it gonna look like to actually add some upgrade CI tests in OLM V1? Thoughts? 310. For controller. Create a discussion operator controller to discuss. Our upgrade support policy. And I'll take that one. And then. Frederick, would you mind taking on this one? Just adding the
Yeah,
comment.
sure.
Thank you, I
Yeah, sure.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Cool. And is there anything else we want to discuss here before we conclude for the day?
So since there is 20 minutes left, I might thought it might be worth bringing up a question that I keep trying to bring out in different like RFCs and stuff like that, but I don't think it's gotten the traction that I was hoping that it'd get, or maybe it did, and I'm not sure exactly. And I'm looking for an update. Essentially, some of the issues also that we've also seen today for milestone 5, for example, one of the issues that says make sure that an operator resource gets reconciled if, for example, a package does not exist, but then a catalog is created in which the package exists. So when that happens, the operator resource should go from the failed state to the reconciled state. And then even with the upgrade policy, we have, you know, whether we are talking about allowing users to decide how the upgrade takes place. I'm a little confused at this point because I think we discussed, you know, how the upgrade policy will look like, and in our effort to be more declarative and not have implicit workflows that gets users into the state of, oh, I don't know what's happening right now, or gets us into the state where we have to keep introducing new APIs. It seems like these sort of efforts is leading us again towards the implicit sort of workflow that'll land us in the same V0 state in V1 also. Does that make sense? Is anybody, or are we, is anybody concerned about that? Or are we saying that, no, it's fine, we'll just have these implicit workflows instead of saying that if you've created an operator resource where the package does not exist, we'll just say the package does not exist and will fail. If you introduce a new API, if you introduce a catalog which has the package, then the operator API that was reconciled already is in a failed state. We will not do anything about it. So you need to create a new operator API. And this time, because the package exists, the operator installation will be successful.
So under that circumstance, I think we don't want to add a new API. It's just when the catalog changes, we should reconcile failed cases and try them again. Though it depends upon the failure, but so I mean, the hope is that we don't run into these situations where we get into a state that we can't resolve, where it can't be resolved without, you know, like completely manual overrides. You know, if we update the catalog or the catalog gets updated, that should trigger, re-resolution.
I think I hear contradictory statements.
Okay.
First statement says that if the package does not exist, then the operator API should fail. Depends on the failure. But then the second statement says that there should be reconciliation. There should be re-trigger of reconciliation if something changes in the cluster state.
Right. So how do those contradict each other? Just because it's entered the failed state doesn't mean a failed state is permanent.
Okay. Joe had his hand up, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, I was going to agree with Todd. Essentially, like we're going to resolve and it's going to say there's no package here. And then it'll sit there waiting for inputs to change. One of the inputs that could change is a new catalog comes in which case there's another opportunity to re-resolve, and we'll say, Nope, yeah, package still not here, same status, and then again, the catalog updates, and all of a sudden now. That package is there and we resolved successfully. So I think there are probably very few, if any, terminal failure cases, probably zero. There might be cases where we need to decide like, oh, are we gonna have an exponential back off and like retry without inputs changing versus are we going to fail and say that like, we're not gonna reconcile again until something else triggers us to go again. So those are the sorts of things that we probably have to think about a little bit. Is like, are we gonna do exponential back off or wait till inputs change? And my default would be until something changes, like, let's just do exponential back off as a default, unless we're really sure that the only way that it fixes itself is with some input that changes.
And I mean, with policy, there may be policies where it's, it enters a state such that it's like, you can't upgrade until Friday afternoon at 5 p.m. And so nothing, unless that policy changes or something else, changes in the configuration, the policy, the catalog, the operator itself should trigger a resolution again, regardless of the state. We should, as Joe points out, we should strive for no terminal error cases.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like we're already thinking about all these things. I think Ankita also had a comment that says that in the chat that says terminal failures remind her of install plans. FYI, install plans did not have terminal failures to begin with, and I think who's in the call who can correct me if I'm wrong, but terminal, like the way that we got to that state where some of the failures had to be called terminal was because it was getting into the state of, oh, I have the install plan, but then it's just in this unknown state forever, and I don't know what to do about it. And if it's in that state, there is no reconciliation happening. So, I have to go and delete all of these install plans, do a bunch of cleanups in order to, essentially get the controllers to start reconciling the resources that I want created again. All of this is getting into that state of, okay, if you look at RPM, how package installation works for example, your Linux machine, all of them say that we will not, upgrade automatically in the background your packages. If you want to upgrade, you have to do brew update to first, pull in the content and then brew update package or RPM update particular package manually to upgrade a package, versus us where we are saying that no, we'll be constantly working in the background upgrading these things, which is, I guess, the Kubernetes model, which makes sense. But then it gets us into that state of, oh, now we have to take care of all of these edge cases or have these API sprawl. So there's a bunch of implications, but it sounds like Joe's also saying that we'll have to start off with exponential back off, and then as we progress, iterate on and see if that's the correct way to go. And if that's
to comment on that one point right there, Anik, with the, the declarative versus implicit approaches, there is some ongoing work where like RuckPack is basically a command line tool, and Depi as a CLI kind of thing is being looked at. And I don't think the work being done in those spaces are commitments to going in that direction, but they are very useful POCs that can help influence what like an on cluster experience, what it looks like versus an off cluster, and what the benefits of both are, right? And so I think this is a very large conversation to have in the next 10 minutes. And I really encourage everyone to get, deeply involved in those POCs and to, engage in this, because I think Onyx bringing up a big point, because like this user experience is definitely a tricky one. And it's one that we really need all the brain power in the room to comment on. I see 2 hands up, so I'll leave it to Vu and then Joe.
Yes, I just want to say something real quick here involving the upgrade thing. I cannot speak for V1, which is what you are currently working on, but I can speak for V0 a little bit. That there are cases when the resolution failure is terminal, and there are cases that are not. And the criteria for that is if we consider the resolution is incomplete in the sense that it may potentially pick the wrong solution, then we consider that terminal. Because that's unlikely going to changing the event, changing the outcome, in the sense that the outcome would not exist or it's not correct, and we shouldn't keep retrying it. And there's some cases when the failure considered temporary because it's just something was happening that we wasn't sure, so we will retry that to get the information later. So depending on how we're doing this, is basically consider you can consider as how you consider something is not acceptable, and you should stop it from doing that. And that's the thing that you see just some kind of like transitional error, and then you can keep retrying it. To me, the resolution is not expensive by any means, so retrying is not a problem. You just need to gating it from choosing the wrong stuff because leading to some missing information. For example, the catalogs sort missing, the one that we require is usually a terminal error, and that's how it goes. And that's something probably we can learn from and see how that fit into the V1, big picture and all of that. That's just something I want to say real quick. That's all.
At the risk of just making this conversation just go even longer, I think the difference between V0 and V1 is that in V0, it seems like a lot of what we built was sort of based on state machines and how you transition from one state to another. And it was sort of shared between potentially like multiple controllers. And so like the idea of sort of refactoring that to avoid the current terminal cases that we have now it's just almost insurmountable. So that's why I think for example, there's nothing in the actual OLM V0 APIs right now that somehow dictates that certain failure modes are permanently terminal, right? Like we could re-architect the implementations behind those APIs and make them retry for some of the cases. And in fact, like we've been doing that, right? Like we've got Nikolai's been fixing the one where that's terminal if the pod doesn't unpack correctly. So there's definitely places that we can do that. I think there's a point where it's like where it becomes harder and harder and harder to do that because of all the interactions between the controllers. But in OLM V1, we learn from our mistakes. In theory, and really not in theory, but even in practice, like reconcilers should be idempotent such that if they see the same input, they produce the same output essentially. So that it's not really a state machine anymore. It's just this idempotent process that tries to put the cluster closer to the desired state. And so the important thing to do is model what the desired state is, and then implement the behavior that you want based on what that desired state is. So that's what I think we're building right now, like with the operator API and even with RuckPack and some of the other APIs, is just make sure that our reconcilers are idempotent, make sure that when inputs that could possibly affect us change, we always re-reconcile. And then we'll always gravitate towards and get closer to making the current state look like the desired state.
I see what you're saying, Joe, but depending on how you're implementing V1, it's somewhat a similar story that there's a two-step behind everything, meaning the resolution step and then the execution step, aka the resolver resolving the information that it gathered from the request and then the current state of the cluster, and it's going to generate certain object. And then there's subsequent controller loop to actually executing those resources to installing this, install that. And from what I see, V1 is doing the similar thing that, resolver generate, I don't know, bundle instances or whatever that is. And then the controller of those particular resources will executing it. So is there a component of state machine that you said is there, but how the resolver determine that those control not to generate those resources, to not let the other controller take action, the subsequent action is the thing that it seems that you alluding to. And I agree with that, but how is that being architecture is different. conversation there.
Yeah, there's definitely feedback loop still, especially, well, there's not a feedback loop yet, but as soon as we do the consider upgrade edges, then we've got a feedback loop because the resolution that happens as an, like, takes as input one of the things that we previously output. So that issue is going to be very interesting because it has to consider some edge cases that will dictate what happens when, we can't figure out what's installed, or what's installed is not something that we can look up and resolve against. So we'll have to address those things, but at the end of the day, it still needs to be idempotent. And yes, maybe like that, like for example, say we have a bundle deployment aligned with a operator that has foobar version 1 installed, and we want to see if, and there's an operator for that, and we want to see if we can upgrade to version 2. And so we go back and reconcile that foobar operator again, and it says like, well, I have no idea what this foobar version 1 is. It's not in a catalog. I have no idea. Essentially, that means there's no upgrade edges, right? Like at the end of the day, that just means like, I can't upgrade this. And we have a resolution that fails that says like, sorry, this particular operator can't be upgraded because nothing in the catalog upgrades from it. And then we put that on there. And so I think a lot of this is also going back to not having, like, we have this problem in OLM v0 where if anything about the resolution fails, then nothing progresses. And we've talked about ways to solve that, where like if one piece of the subgraph of resolution fails, then that's okay. Like we'll mark the objects and say why those things failed. But for unrelated pieces of the resolution, like let's still make progress and we can keep moving. So there's a whole host of improvements that we're talking about making for OLM v1 that should solve hopefully all of those problems that we have with v0.
Yes, I know we run out here. I try not to get into this so much. I apologize to anyone who has listened to this. But here's the thing, there are two, I said it earlier, that there's 2 steps here. So when the failure happen in some of the tests, in either of the tests, you need to consider that which one is relevant, in the sense that resolution failure is one thing, I mean, it cannot resolve the resolution, and it's just won't create any subsequent resources. And then there's execution failure when there's install plan, for example, on top of v0 here and whatever that equivalent of that is in v1. It failed to apply certain resources. It will get stuck in even worse state, meaning that there's some resource out there that you create successfully and some you didn't. And those resources impacting subsequent resolution. So it's actually stuck even in a worse state that the resolver cannot move forward. And so that's why you need to consider that. That's why I'm saying that the v0 right now is kind of not doing the way it should be. That should be atomic, that you either do it all or you don't. And because the two-step set that I said earlier that causing this problem, that should not happen. So that's one thing I just want to mention quickly here. And I swear this is going to be the last thing I said. That's it.
This is good conversation. Thank you everybody for contributing. But it sounds like we are doing these incremental changes. We need to discuss a lot of these things, but also the conversation about the OLM, the DEPI CLI that gets us into that. I'll do my resolution. I'll install the operator API. We are also investigating that avenue. But I'm glad we had this conversation anyway, and we have 1 minute left. So Alex, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, and so, my one big ask is everybody keep this conversation going. Perhaps we get a bit of a discussion going on the operator controller repository, because I think it'll be really useful to have like written examples that we speak to and describe the desired user experience that we're going to work towards. I think, I think some parts of this conversation are very nebulous just because we don't have specific examples to speak to. So I would love to just capture a few of them and, be able to focus the conversation around those specific topics. So on that note, thank you everybody for being here today. This was a really productive meeting. I will make sure to follow up on the to-dos assigned to me. Please do the same, and I will see you all next week.
and hopefully sooner in the upstream Slack channel. All right. Thanks again.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah.
Bye.